So, welcome everybody, and great to have you here. Thanks so much for joining today. This is one of our fireside webinars that we run here at ProdPad, one of our product expert webinars. We've been running these things for years, so you can go back into our history. If you go to prodpad.com/webinars, there's a history of all the conversations that we've had with product experts in the past. We've always recorded them and shared them out there and put out transcripts and all that sort of stuff. And these things are always with a focus on bringing in amazing, smart experts who have world experience with the world of product management. And so there's always a focus on the content, the learning, sharing what we know here. So today is going to be recorded. You will have a chance to ask questions. Feel free to use the chat, as I can see people already are, which is very cool. And yeah, we'll have a chance to dive into. Today we're talking about the pitfalls of product management. So
Pitfalls. There's so many.
yeah, exactly. Product management is such a contentious subject because it's like the output of what people see the product manager do, but there's so much that goes into it, and it's not just the product manager doing the road mapping,
Yeah,
right?
it's the
So
iceberg, really, the tip of the iceberg, right? There's so much
tip of
underneath
the
it all,
iceberg, yeah, it's
too.
a good way to put it. We're going to be talking about all that. I know that some people have written in with their questions as well, so we've got those ready. And use the Q&A area here today. You should be able to see each other's questions and give them a +1 thumbs up, and that way we know which ones are the most burning questions. Now, before we jump in and start talking to C.Todd about this, I just want to share a little bit about ProdPad. So I know many of you already know ProdPad, so thanks so much for your support. For anybody who hasn't tried it, it's a tool that myself and my co-founder Simon built originally when we were product managers ourselves. And we needed something to help keep track of the ideas and the experiments and the steps in our roadmap and all that sort of stuff. So we built something that's now being used by thousands of product teams around the world. And basically, what it's doing, it's giving you a single source of truth for all your product decisions. It's giving you space to capture your high level vision and your goals, as well as your more strategic steps on your roadmap. So it's a now, next, later roadmap builder, as well as the more tactical stuff, like what ideas and experiments in your backlog and what have your customers been asking for. So it's something that you can try for free. And we even have a sandbox mode that you can jump into that has example data like roadmaps and OKRs and feedback and experiments, and you can see how it all knits together in one product management space. So would love to see a bunch of you give it a try and let us know how it's going, because we're all product people here and we'd love to get your feedback. And in the meantime, one of the other things that we've launched with ProdPad is Copilot. Some of you have been beta testing on this for a few months now, and some of you might have seen our launch just last month. But Copilot is an AI agent that underpins the whole thing. And so it's your sidekick, your product management coach. You can ask it advice on whether your roadmap is aligned with your vision. You can take an existing roadmap, a screenshot of it, and just feed it to Copilot, and it'll turn it into your first ProdPad roadmap for you. It will assess feedback for you and tell you what objectives might line up with it. Basically, you can ask it anything, and we'd love to hear your use cases, find out how you're using it, if there's anything that we haven't thought of already, and we love seeing those examples. Give it a try and let us know what Copilot does for you. So I want to introduce you to C.Todd. So C.Todd is a longtime friend in the product management space. We've known each other through the Mind the Product network for
At
like
least
a
10 years at
decade.
this point now. It's at least a decade, I'm sure.
Yeah, absolutely. So he's a product leader and a design strategist with years of experience helping teams build and launch products that actually solve real world problems. He's spoken on stages around the world. If you haven't seen his MTPCon talks in the past, then get in and have a look at that because he's fantastic. And he talks about design thinking, innovation, agile product management, agile product development. And he's a mentor as well. He's been helping the next generation of product leaders level up. We were just talking about his work teaching these days, which is fantastic to hear. And if you're into product books, you've probably come across some of his before. He co-authored Design Sprint, Product Roadmaps Relaunched, which actually has examples of ProdPad roadmaps in there, which is fantastic. And
Yeah, I think like there was a forward there or something that you were part of.
yeah, I wrote the foreword. Thank you, C.Todd. So I know that one quite intimately. And most recently, he's written Product Research Rules. But I heard from C.Todd just earlier today that he's working on another one as well, which C.Todd, you're Please give us anything
Sure.
I've missed from your bio, as well as
No,
a bit
that's
of a
great.
book.
Look at that. I'm like, is that really me? No, that's not me. That's gotta be something else.
Did I do all that? You did all
I didn't
that.
do all that. Anyways, yeah, because I'm just me. So yeah, the latest thing that I'm digging into, and to everyone on the call, if you have thoughts, opinions, or have somebody I should talk to, I would love to. Please reach out to me and let's talk more. So when I was at my time at AppQs, I met a guy named Romley John. He is now sort of his own content creator. He's really active on LinkedIn. He's amazing. Super smart guy, does a lot of like product marketing and onboarding. Like he actually wrote the book, I think it's product led onboarding.
Yeah.
And so we just hit it off at AppQs, and now we both moved on from there. We both still have this curiosity around the concept of creating delight with your product. And there's a whole bunch of things that are going on around that, but also like this smashing tidal wave that's hitting us around AI. And so how do we think about creating delightful products with artificial intelligence and think about what the guardrails are, but also, and I don't want to be like a doom and gloom type of thing, but it's like, yeah, sure, they're guardrails, but also what's good? It's one thing when you hear about AI, it's like, oh, it's very dystopian. Like, oh, it's going to take over everything. It's okay, but what's good and how can we use this for good? And that's really what our directive is here, is what can we investigate around that? And also maybe give a bit more, a lot of the conversation around delight in the product space has been related to the Kano model, which is in like the 1980s. And I think there's been a lot more research and more really helping to better refine what delight is in the management sort of academic space. And I'm like, how do we bring that more towards the forefront of the conversation and mash that up with artificial intelligence? So anyways, a bit of a long-winded answer, but delightful intelligence is what we're digging into. And I'm excited, really excited about it.
Yeah, absolutely. Me too. We were just talking about this earlier and saying that building for AI right now is a little bit like, it's a bit Wild West, right? It's like building for mobile apps coming up 20 years ago. We're still working out the patterns. We're still figuring out what works, what doesn't work. And there's just so much to discover. So really timely book. Looking forward to that one.
Thank you.
And so in the meantime, just mentioned this a moment ago, the fact that road mapping is like the tip of the iceberg, right? It's like the place that everything comes to a head as a product manager. Why is road mapping so difficult? What's going on there?
I think you ask 5 people, you'll get 10 different answers to this question.
Yeah.
So my answer may be very different than yours, but I think the thing that I think about that is hard is humans are complex and nuanced, and it's a bit reflective in a roadmap. I think that's the hard part. There is, I think it's some maybe under popularized research that talked about, they looked at super projects. Think about in Boston, there's the Big Dig, right? Where they basically sunk an entire highway underneath the city. And any of these super projects, the thing that's missed out a lot, because they're always way over budget, they tend to be not actually living up to what the initial promises were that the politicians and the builders actually advertised or marketed.
So missed scope. Yep.
And so part of it is there's this element, but one of the things, the research that talked about these super projects was that the thing that everybody misses is the coordination of people working together. And people don't realize how much of a skill that is. And the people just assume that people know how to work together and can be aligned and work together. So one of the reasons, to get back to your question of like, why is road mapping so hard? A lot of it is you're trying to align a number of different moving parts. And every organization is going to have a different set of moving parts. So if you're really good at road mapping in one organization, and then you get locked up and plopped into another organization, you go to a different job, you might find it's incredibly impossible. You're like, wow, this was so easy over here, but it's so hard over here. Why? And it's because so many moving parts are different. And you might have gotten accustomed to be able to, oh, I know how these moving parts work together, and I can actually navigate and deal with these set of moving parts. But I go somewhere else and it's wildly different than what I'm used to. The moving parts are different. They're moving at different velocities. And so how do I actually pull them together? And it might take you some time to figure that out. So I think the short answer is because people and organizations are much more complex than I think we understand them, than we think they are. And we're trying to put everybody in an aligned direction. So I think that's the thing. Why are roadmaps hard? Because there's so many things going on, and some things, a lot of things we don't even pay attention to. And one of the reasons why my co-author Bruce went off and wrote a whole book around alignment was because all of our road mapping workshops, we have heard the same question over and over again. How do I convince my stakeholders? How do I convince my boss? How do I convince my engineering manager? How do I convince my insert stakeholder here? And so he was like, we were like, wow, we need to include a whole chapter on that for the next edition. Like we kept talking about that. And then I think he ended up pairing off with Melissa and just like they wrote a whole book on it, which is
Yeah.
fantastic. All the lines.
A much needed
One of the
book,
things, right?
absolutely. If anybody hasn't read Aligned by Bruce McCarthy and Melissa Appel, then definitely get in and have a look at that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you know what you're saying, it reminds me of you were there actually. You remember my talk where I
Oh
was at
yeah.
Mind the Product, where
That's great.
I basically summed it up as people are hard. This
Yeah.
is why product management is difficult, is because people are hard. And I think it was during that talk that I first started talking about the idea of your roadmap as a prototype for your strategy,
Oh yeah,
right? A
I think
place where you
I lifted that quote and said every single talk I gave after that, I was like, this is what Jenna passed out. And it just like it's but it's hard. And one of the things I loved about it was
yeah,
that you took a tool that product people know, prototyping,
yeah,
and you said, hey, look, take the same approach you have to creating a prototype, meaning it's not finished, it's not polished, it's not meant to be shippable, so to speak.
yeah,
It's meant for you to learn something. Take that same approach and curiosity and now apply that to your roadmap
yeah,
for your, but now that's your artifact, right? It's not a actual product prototype. It's still an artifact, but it's a prototype of what your product strategy is or could be, right?
yeah.
And that approach is really fantastic. And I've used that a number of times because I would always be like, hey, I got a draft of the roadmap. Can you help me think through it? That is
Yeah.
such a great conversation starter between your stakeholders. It is amazing.
And part of what it does, it tries to take the pressure off making this perfect roadmap. We see a lot of people coming through to try ProdPad, and a lot of them are looking for stuff like roadmap template, and they're looking for the perfect version of what a roadmap should look like. And there is no perfect version, right?
Oh,
Because you absolutely should work to some sort of template or something that some common shape or way that you talk about the roadmap. But really, it's not about the roadmap itself, because that's going to
no.
get thrown out. That's going to get changed. It's going to hit a wall as soon as you show it to somebody and you say, this is my first draft. And they go, whoa, what about this? Or what
Right.
about that?
It's the
Um,
everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face type of thing. Right,
exactly.
right. Or
Exactly.
maybe was it Eisenhower or whatever the famous army general said, everyone's plan falls apart as soon as they actually get out to the battlefield type of thing.
Yeah,
Right?
absolutely
That
that.
type
And
of thing.
it is a battlefield. And to your point, this is why it changes per company, right? Because it's not the roadmap, it's the road mapping process. And the
Mhm.
process has to change based on the people that you're working with, the context in which you're working, depending on how mature your product is, or how much tech debt it has, or what that tricky
Right.
stakeholder over there is like in your particular company. Everyone has a tricky stakeholder, right?
Oh God, who does? And it's not that they're trying to be difficult; they're trying to do their job, and that's
Yeah.
the thing, right? They're not trying to be this tricky stakeholder, and they may not even know they're the tricky stakeholder. I think another thing that I've learned probably in the decade of talking with teams, my own experience, and talking with others is that almost every problem with a roadmap can be bubbled up into two macro categories. It's you've either got a strategy problem or you have an alignment problem. Now, there are
Mhm.
subcategories from there, but you've either got a problem around your strategy, meaning you haven't set your goals appropriately, they're not clear, they're conflicting, you haven't prioritized appropriately. Like, again, I bucket those in one macro category around strategy. The other one is around alignment. Okay, again, there could be an issue with goals, there could be some confliction. You've got one stakeholder or multiple stakeholders that are misaligned, and that's causing an issue. Almost every roadmap problem can be boiled down to one of those two challenges. And so for
Yeah.
you as the PM, whatever level you are, you've got to think about, okay, am I trying to solve an alignment issue here? Or I've got some other kind of strategic issue that I'm dealing with
Yeah.
uh, that I've got to start to figure out how to solve. Because one of the challenges of the roadmaps is what's the actual problem you need to solve here? Is it an alignment problem? Is it a people problem? Like I've got customers telling me to do X, Y, and Z, and I've got salespeople telling me to do A, B, and C, and I've got support telling me to do D, E, and F, and it's okay. That's an alignment problem,
Yeah.
right? I haven't gotten alignment from everybody on what we should be doing. Or is it like I haven't clearly established product goals that line up to my company goals, right? And so I can show progress that, oh, if I've done solved these product areas, shipped these features, got these outcomes, I can now point up to a higher level company goal and say, yeah, look, this helps us drive this revenue or decrease this cost or whatever. And that's more of a potential strategy problem.
Yeah, it's a really good way of categorizing them, and I think people run into both of them. How do you avoid creating a roadmap that looks impressive, but ultimately isn't fit for purpose, is indicative of underlying problems?
And I think we've all created, every single one of us here in this call has probably created a roadmap in that exact thing. Like we created it, it looks good, it looks great, everyone agrees to it. but there's some ticking time bomb somewhere. I think part of it is remember or recognize that same ethos around your prototype, right? Prototypes are not permanent; they are changing, right? You might have a prototype that helps you out with one area of your product or one feature, or helps you solve one problem, but it might need to evolve and change later. Oh yeah, we've solved those things, but now what's the next thing? So your roadmap should be evolving. The rule of thumb I've come to is, and I'd love to hear if this how lines up with you or anybody else, is that your roadmap should probably change like 80% up to 80% of the time and not change 20% of the time. There should be 80-20 rule. And then you also should have this other artifact called the release plan, which is the inverse. The release plan should be, this is the highest stuff we're really confident in, we are shipping it, and 80% of it is never going to change, and 20% of it might. Much more tactical, much more focused, typically owned by engineering or a delivery side of the organization. But that's how I also think about this. And so telling everybody like, look, this is going to change. This is what our snapshot is of our current thinking with all the information we have right now today, this quarter. And we hope it doesn't change drastically over the next 3 to 6 months, but it might, because we know things change. Like I'm sure OpenAI's roadmaps changed drastically once they saw DeepSeek come out.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, you're speaking about the difference between a roadmap and a release plan. This is still one that gets everybody tripped up. You talked about what's the difference, but what should be on a release plan that's not on a roadmap, and what should be on a roadmap that's not on a release plan?
Sure, great question. And I think this is the thing that we came to. I think a few of us, when we were doing research to the book, Bruce, Evan, and I, we started talking to a lot of people about this, and we're like, oh, there was this sort of an aha moment we had. We're like, wait. Everyone expects a roadmap to have all these release plan, project plan type of dates around, oh, it's going to be released on this date, it's going to have these specific features, it's going to have all of this stuff. So you don't really want to have specific dates on your, like maybe general timeframes, like, yeah, quarters, months, maybe to a certain point. Again, it all depends on how fast you can deliver things, what the velocity of your organization is. Because things change, keep it more broad. Hey, this is what I know you even took that to one step more abstract to be like, hey, now, next, later. Great way to do things. Sometimes that's harder for people to grasp. Be like, okay, that's great and all, but I need something a little more concrete. So hence like quarters or months sometimes can be a little bit more refined. But if you start to go too sharper than that, unless you are like incredibly precise at being able to predict what to do and how long it will take to deliver, it's probably going to start to break down if you try to do more finer grain than that in terms of resolution. So with things like dates, yeah, you want to put, oh, this should be shipped in March or April. That's really more of a release plan kind of thing, because it's the engineering team that hits the release button and hits the deploy button, right? It's not the product person. You do it together, you make sure you're aligned, but you let the engineering team own that. And I remember when I was at Openly, I had a really good relationship with the VP of engineering there, Joe, and it was like, he totally owned that release plan. I said, hey, look, Joe, we can divide this up. You own the release plan, we'll own the roadmap, and here's how we can split it up. And you guys can determine when things should actually go out the door when they've passed all the tests and they meet the criteria that you see. And he was like, oh my God, this is great. Yeah. And so the roadmap gives that higher level direction, the things that you don't see, maybe like higher level thematic area, like maybe even goals or outcomes. That's what's on your roadmap. Your release plan is like, hey, this is what we made and when we want to ship it. So yeah, a little bit like answering what and when is the release plan, answering why and what, that's maybe on the roadmap. And so that sort of what is the Venn diagram overlap.
Yeah, absolutely. And as you get closer to what's happening in the near term, the now sort of time, this is when you start seeing the larger grain stuff being broken down into more fine grain stuff. Now, do you find that people tend to go too granular or not granular enough on roadmaps? What sort of pitfalls do you run into there?
I've seen people trying to force the release plan into the roadmap and just like, oh, they just want one artifact and they want the roadmap and the release plan to basically all be smashed together. Like, give me everything. And then depending on the size of your organization, right? If you're a small organization, you can probably get away with that for a short period of time until you get to a certain size. But at some point, you really, it's good to separate that, because then you also have different owners, different ownership of it, right? Let the product team own the roadmap and direction. Let the engineering team own what's actually getting shipped and when, right? And it's not like they're working in a silo. There should be an overlap.
Yeah.
I think one of the things I remember from using your product was that you had this great way to send stuff into Jira. So like we would take some thematic stuff and we connected it to our Jira and we shipped stuff over there from that. Okay, great. And that could help put stuff in our backlog and say, okay, great. Now I have the designers work on this. And then once that would help chunk up the work for us. And so that was a really cool thing to be able to do that kind of tooling.
Yeah. Exactly that. And what it's doing, it's giving you this view into what's happening in the development side without going too fine-grained. Because ultimately, the roadmap shouldn't have everything that's in your Jira on it, right? There's going to be
Right.
bugs and DevOps
Yeah.
tasks and just stuff that needs to be done that aren't strategic. They don't need to be communicated at the roadmap level. And so you don't need this roadmap that points out the minute by minute as to,
Right.
what everyone's working on in the dev team.
But sometimes there does need to be a communication of, hey, how come we're not doing this? Or what's taking the engineering so long? Oh, did you realize that there was these like 3 bugs that they had to refactor that they're going to really hurt these 7, 8 clients, whatever, however many clients? There's that you have to communicate as a PM, be like, hey, the engineering team is not going to be able to deliver some of that because we have this other thing going on. They're doing some code refactoring, whatever, right? And that's, I think, also useful. That's, again, it doesn't have to be on the roadmap, might be worthwhile to mention if you're talking about it at a certain level. Again, depending on how stratified your company is. Smaller companies might be a little easier. Larger companies, you might have to start to call some of that stuff out. Be like, yeah, we're carving out this quarter, 50% of engineering capacity is going to be over on this infrastructure, bug fix, whatever, right?
Yeah.
Calling that out so that you're not going to get hammered like, hey, how come you're not driving X, Y, or Z, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of larger companies working to the quarter and things like that, what's your take on time progression, milestones that are set to the quarter or set to months or whatever you're
Yeah, I
seeing out
think it's
there?
good to have goals. Like you want to have goals, right? You want, it's always, I think about from I'm an amateur cyclist, I like having goal like races to run or rides to go for.
Yeah.
It's good to have a flag in the sand to be like, this is what we're targeting for. So putting goals down is really important. Make sure those goals are aligned with your company goal. So what's the difference between a product goal and a company goal? Like product goal might be something around, oh, we expect to have some kind of onboarding turnover or onboarding conversion here. That might actually translate to a revenue goal or a retention goal in your company at a higher level. So I want to make sure that, hey, do those things align? Is that more of goes back to that strategy element, right? Make
Yeah.
sure that stuff is clear on your roadmap so that you can communicate it out.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I think one of the biggest misconceptions of lean road mapping, like now, next, later, for example, is that there's no dates. Right. And the thing
Yeah.
is, we don't live in La Land where we're like,
Yeah.
it'll happen when it happens. The concept of trying to stay away from date-driven development is not having arbitrary dates that lock down time and scope. Because if time and scope are locked, then quality is what suffers. And that's how a
Right.
lot of teams end up in really stressful positions, building a whole bunch of tech debt and no fun. But the thing is, if something has a due date that's tied to something external, important, strategically key, then communicate that on your roadmap.
Hey,
Because
we've got a conference
all
to go
all
to
it's
or launch.
all
Yeah.
yeah. What we're seeing is people moving away from timelines and realizing that they don't have that date anchor at the top, which is actually really healthy because as soon as you have that date anchor at the top, it means that everything that you've put on that roadmap has to have a due date, which
Yeah.
probably isn't true for your company. Some things are going to have due dates and some things aren't, and communicate those at the right level.
Yeah. Yeah. And then it goes back to scope, like scope it appropriately. You're like, do you have enough discovery to clarify? This was the part of a prioritization challenge is like, oh, if I'm scoring things to determine prioritization, like if you don't have it, this is where the confidence sort of element comes in. Oh, we're not confident that we can ship this or get this delivered by that. Your engineering team says, okay, why? Maybe we don't have enough data or details. Like we haven't done enough discovery to know how important it is. We haven't done
Yeah.
enough technical discovery to determine just how hard it's going to be to actually build. Right. Let's make sure we carve out some of that time in the
Yeah.
process. But I think there's a balance between having some goals like public companies have quarterly, they have to produce quarterly reports for the street, right?
Yeah.
They're different. You're in a different zone there when you're talking about I'm a public company, I have these quarterly reports and I've got quarterly goals that I'm trying to hit. So totally understand that's going to cascade down appropriately. But and there may be some elements of yep, we need to show progress, right? We want to show progress on making our product better in some way, shape, or form over the quarter. So having some goal is good, but it doesn't necessarily have to apply to every single element on your roadmap, right?
And that's actually really healthy. And we're seeing that actually carry through to smaller companies as well, is having some sort of cadence. And it doesn't have to be quarterly. Remember that quarters are arbitrary periods that have been made up. For publicly traded companies, obviously they work to quarters and stick with the quarters. We've tested all different sort of cycle lengths. My favorite
Mm,
was a 6 to 7 week cycle, which is half of a quarter, basically, but you're actually doing 6 weeks of work and then 1 week review to check whether that work has worked, right?
yeah.
And plan for the next one. And that means you're getting more cycles to iterate and to try things out. There's no reason why something needs to take 13 weeks. But regardless of the cycle that you're picking, whether it's a 13-week quarter or whether it's something shorter or longer, whatever works, the goal isn't to say, this is what we're going to have delivered by this date. Because in order to do that, you've got to start planning several quarters
Right,
ago to
okay.
get
Then you're doing a kind of waterfall
and it'll
development,
slow the
which you
company
might be able
down.
to do, but that might shift
Exactly.
exactly how you, yeah.
It's possible to do, but in smaller doses. I call it the project management penalty, right?
Yeah.
You're spending extra time, extra cycles just to figure out how long it's going to take as opposed to just cracking on and doing it. But
Yeah.
Dom says in the chat channel here, he says sometimes like having a meeting, a deadline to comply with some new EU regulation,
Yep.
for example, right?
Yep. And
Happens
I'm
often
having worked in
enough.
the insurance industry, like they're definitely like, oh yeah, we've got to comply with this and we have
Yeah.
to comply with this by this certain date. Or if we
Yeah.
don't, then we risk a fine. Okay,
Yeah.
prioritize it and make sure it gets the resources it needs to be delivered at the right level of quality by that time frame. And then it becomes more about, okay, we have okay, great. That's in progress on the roadmap. The rest of the details go on the release plan because you know you have high confidence you're going to deliver this thing. You have to for regulatory purposes. So then track it on a project plan or a release plan that's geared, use the artifact that's geared for that thing. Don't use a roadmap to be a project planner.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly that. Separate the two because they've got two different audiences, right? The roadmap is it's a strategic document, right? This is
Yeah.
for people to understand and get that alignment that you're talking
Yeah.
about. Whereas the release plan is about what things are we working on right now and when is everything going to come out. And some people can do release plan longer than others. It depends on how much you're willing to
Totally.
invest in that. And if you're
Yeah.
working in a more regulated space, then it is going to move slower. That's the difficulty. But also, if you're able to do that, you create a moat because it means that other people aren't able to meet the regulations, guidelines, and
Yeah.
deadlines that you're trying to do. But the key
The other
thing
thing around
is
that is if you start to have hardware at all or any other kind of non-software comportion of your roadmap. And I've been in situations where that a number of the companies I worked for have like IoT or biotech where you
yep,
have, yes, you have software, but you have these other components to it. And a hardware roadmap is different. It is definitely more waterfall, right? There still can be agility baked in,
yeah,
but you still have to do a lot of things to get something from a hardware perspective
yeah,
out the door. And it's very different than software.
yeah,
But finding the alignment, it goes back to, all right, now you almost have to spend a lot more time on alignment because software can go so much faster.
yeah.
Um, and hardware doesn't go as fast.
Hardware doesn't go as fast, and what that creates is more risk, right? Because if you get the wrong thing, if you build the wrong thing, it's not just days of work or weeks of work, it could be months or even years of work down the line, down the drain. And so it's all about making sure that you are de-risking it as much as possible. And that's actually where lean road mapping is helpful because you're saying way up front, sometimes you're able to see years in the future with a now next later roadmap. This is the thing that we're working towards. And now that it's getting closer, we can break it down. And of course, it moves more slowly, but it's still providing the same service to the company, which is to align people and make sure that things are tied back to the big company strategy so you don't build the wrong thing. Here at ProdPad, we have a number of hardware and software IoT type companies using it. One is using it to build like door handles and security systems, for example. And they've got software teams, hardware teams, and firmware teams in between using
Yep.
now, next, later. I was talking to somebody from the NASA Jet Propulsion Lab the other day, and they work in a now, next, later way. And what's fascinating is if anybody has a hard launch, it's got to be the Jet Propulsion Launch Lab, right?
Yeah.
If there's any
Yep.
sort of hard release date you got to stick to, yeah, the planets are only going to align this one time, so we got to do it. And they can
Right.
still work in this way. And it
Yeah.
doesn't mean that they do everything in a non-date driven way. What they're doing is setting dates for things that need to, and then building backwards from there.
Right. And I think it goes back to use the right artifact for purpose, right? Like my roadmap will align people and get people going in directionally, and that will help let everyone know strategically where we're going. And then, yeah, once I've gotten the validation for all the right items, great. It's on the release plan. We've got some more project type mindset on it. And now it's about, okay, chunking through the work and making sure it gets out the door appropriately. And
Yeah,
then because the other
absolutely.
thing is like the one other thing that I don't see a lot of teams doing is what's the outcome? Put the outcome on the roadmap and then go back and check, did you actually get that outcome? Okay, you wanted to increase conversion by 5%. You've shipped this thing, it's not going to immediately cause a 5% conversion. It might take 1 month, 2 months, 3 months to get there. So did you actually go back and say, hey, we anticipated a 5% conversion. we actually got 6.5. Did you actually go back and measure it?
Yes.
Measure that thing. And so that's one of the things that I think I didn't harp on it enough. I don't think we harped on it enough in the book. And I definitely didn't do it enough in some of my past positions, was clearly stating a desired outcome.
Mm-hmm.
And then going back and measuring it and saying, yep, we wanted a 5% increase and we actually got a 4.5, right? Just so that we clearly said, this is the outcome we want. And then also it helped from the executive level to say, yeah, we're trying to get this. If you guys have 7 different feature ideas, great. What is the top 3 that are actually going to get us there that you think, right? And then it's starting to put power into the PM's hands to say, all right, I can experiment with these 7 or maybe do some discovery to figure out which one of these is going to actually move that needle 5% or higher, right?
Yeah, exactly that. And that's why we end up building the completed section of our roadmaps in ProdPad, because what we were realizing is that as time moves forward and you launch something, people would just delete things off the roadmap. And we're like, okay, but where's the record of it, right? I know you have the exports and the previous versions of it, but whatever happened to this thing? And so instead of deleting it, move it to your completed section where you've got this reverse timeline of
Yeah.
things that were done and when and what your target outcomes were and what your actual outcomes were. And what we
Yeah.
realized is if we just created that space for target outcomes and actual outcomes, people would actually spend the time doing that. But without that, people would just be like, launched, what's next?
What's next? Exactly. And that was the thing that, like, again, earlier on, like we didn't harp on it enough in the roadmap, because so when we do an iteration, we're gonna have to make that a little more explicit, because it wasn't until later I was like, oh man,
Yeah.
we didn't call that out enough. We really need to make space for that. The other thing that I think I learned along the way was also clearly state not doing, because I had a couple of these
Mm-hmm.
come up, but he was like, what aren't we doing? I was like, what's on the roadmap is what we are doing. What you don't see is what we aren't. But then they're like, there's everyone has a laundry list of things that's not on the roadmap. And some people like wonder, is it going to get on the roadmap someday? There's some stakeholder somewhere that's hoping something that's
Yeah.
on that laundry list that eventually gets to the roadmap. Part of it, if you're actively chosen, we're actually setting this aside for now. And I think it might have been Buffer who they actually did a version of a Now Next Later, but they had a leaving for now
Yeah.
column. And I thought it was brilliant. And I was like, oh my God. And then we were talking to them, they're like, oh yeah, this has been super helpful, because maybe it wasn't the roadmap, or it was something that had a lot of talk or a lot of chatter, either in or outside the company, but they could put it in this space and be like, yeah, we thought about it, but we're not going to do it right now. We're actively choosing to do that and communicate they have a public roadmap too.
Yeah.
Communicate to both the customers and internally that we're actually not doing this right now. And that was good, because it clarified, like, yeah, we're not doing that thing, even though maybe we talked about it in the past. We've decided against it,
Yeah.
at least for now. And so we're just leaving it. I like the phrase leaving this for now. It wasn't
Leaving
like we're
this for
never doing
now.
that. It's like
Yeah.
we're just leaving this for now.
Exactly that. And that's what we're seeing people use the candidate section in the ProdPad roadmap for. Stuff that you acknowledge is a problem. You've identified, okay, this is what it could look like, but it's actually not our problem right now, right? That's
Mm.
off to this side. These are the things that we're doing, which is in the now, the next, and the later. So you can see
Yeah.
that story. If it becomes a
Nice.
problem, we want to deal with it, bring it over, right? Easy to do that. But for now, it's over there and you can see what the
Yeah,
results
so I
are.
was like,
Leave it
not
versus
even
not.
ready for later. It's not even in the later part. It's over even
Yeah.
before that.
Yeah. Yeah. Reminds me of the interpretation that somebody made of the now, next, later and called it now, next, lol. I was like, yeah,
Like
okay.
LOL.
Yeah,
Like
LOL.
LOL.
Yeah.
Like, I'll
Yeah.
get to it later.
So you wrote the book on road mapping. I think it came out in 2017, which obviously was at this like height of people, product management and deciding what roadmaps looked like. It was a really timely book. But what else has changed since then? What would go into
I
another
mean,
version?
yeah, it's a great question. I think some of it is just our own learnings. Like we talked a lot, and this is one of Bruce's sort of concept around themes and really codifying what a theme is. We've learned, and just through lots of works, like dozens to probably at this point hundreds of workshops, yeah, for sure, and talking to hundreds if not thousands of companies, that the concept of themes, like a lot of PMs might be able to get it, but for them to turn around and go talk about, well, this is the theme for this thing or that thing, and then they're like, and then all their stakeholders, so their designers, their engineering managers, their CEOs, their VPs of finance and marketing, they're like, huh, what's a theme? It was too abstract of a concept in many senses. So part of it was like, how do we ground this down and to make this more concrete? So
Mm-hmm.
that's one of the things I think we learned, is that the concept of a theme, even though we had to better sharpen how we speak about it. I think the concept is sound, but giving PMs the right tooling and language to speak about it I think was a thing we didn't do good enough. So that's one of the things I think has changed is, okay, I think a lot of PMs get it, but they struggle when they're talking to other people about it. So how do we make that crisper and start to be more, and this is where like actually start to not sheet themes, but like actually just say it's what's the outcome you're looking for, right? Start to make it very clear, like we're going for this outcome. What will drive us to that outcome? These things, cool. So we get away from this abstraction of maybe amorphous word of called themes, and we start to be a lot more specific about, oh, the outcome we're looking for is this. And that's going to be different for everybody. So I think that's one thing that I think just our own learnings from our own things we've codified that could be a bit better. But I think the elephant in the room is like, how the heck is AI going to help all of this?
I was about to say, what's AI going to do to our road mapping practices?
Yeah,
What
I
are you
think
seeing?
I hope it helps a lot. Like I think, and I know you mentioned that you've got, maybe you can talk about it a little bit, but I know you've got some efforts on there. But the way my brain thinks about this is, for those on the call who may have ever used Gong, I think about what Gong does. They transcribe all their sales teams' calls, and they start to extract data and insights from those transcripts that would never be seen in, say, a traditional CRM or a sales pipeline. And they start to surface those things by basically reading those transcripts and looking at patterns. One example that I've personally seen happen is, I think one sales rep had a call 4 times with a client, and yet they didn't mention pricing once. And so that just Gong flagged it and said, hey, this sales rep on this deal has had 4 half-hour calls with the client, but they never once talked about pricing. You go look at the transcripts and see that the word pricing and price never was mentioned. Why? Maybe there was something about that, but there's interesting insights there, right? So what's the analog for Gong for all of our product work, right? How can we capture our conversations, our Zendesk or support desk tickets, our emails, our Slack messages? Can we feed that all into an AI that does a similar kind of thing that helps surface and accelerate and augment the PM to be like, what's really important to the business right now? What's really important to our customers? You could have all these either sales calls or support calls and be like, oh, here's what prospective customers want. And that kind of gives you a summary from what all the sales calls, all the Zendesk or support desk tickets help you surface all, like, here's all the feature improvements or things that the current user base wants to see more of or less of, right? And then you've got your Slack and other internal documents. Oh, here's what the rest of the chatter of the marketing team or this. How do you build all of that? And to me, what's that look like? And I would love to see something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's actually the direction that we're going with ProdPad, right? We were already
Tell me
talking
more.
about the AI underlayer that we've built, which basically it has insights as to what your vision is, what your goals are, what the steps on your roadmap are, what you've completed, what's in your not going to happen pile, right? But also all the support tickets that you fed in from your customers, every complaint your customers have had, every joyful piece they've come up with, and it has this picture of where it is you're trying to go, what you've tried, and what direction you should be going based on the business needs as well as your customer needs, and
Right.
then can help make decisions, right? What it's doing is not replacing the product manager, but helping to connect the dots so that the PM doesn't have to hold it all in their head, and they can have this sort of pile of information digested and then laid in front of them so they can say, ah, yes, that's actually really key. Let's go that way.
Yeah.
And
The information
ideally,
gathering piece, which I think is a challenge for any PM, right?
yeah,
You just even thinking about the different repositories of data, right? You've got lots of information in your analytics platforms, whether it be Pendo, Amplitude, whatever your analytics platform is. That gives you some data about how your current customers are using your product, right? You've probably got some onboarding data or marketing data from like Google Analytics, who's using your web page, who's converting
yeah.
from a sign up and whatnot. So that's maybe the marketing team might have some of that data. You've got, if you use ProdPad or any of these other product management tools, specific tools, the product board is another one that I think I'm familiar with. Those kind of things, there's some information there. And then there's like the countless number of presentations, Excel sheets, and other pieces of things on top of all of the Zendesk tickets, the sales calls, this and that, and like the CRM. Like, how do you put it all in one spot? Or how do you at least connect it all to a central repository? And that's sort of the thing that, if what you're talking about, that's awesome. Sign me up, because that is really cool. Because the thing that I struggled with even before a lot of these tools is just like, how do I get everything in one spot? I remember when I first started using ProdPad at
Yeah.
Machine Metrics, it was like, guys, where's all this stuff? And they're like, here. And I was like, okay, so we are going to put everything in ProdPad, and we're just going to have one central repository for all our product information stuff. And then we'll push and pull out as we need. I think they had a whole bunch of stuff in Jira. Actually, they had a huge backlog in Jira.
Yeah, as do a lot of people. That's actually where stuff like this started, was taking the weight off the development side and all the tickets there. But actually, the inputs to product road mapping is infinite, right? You've got what the business
Okay.
needs and what your exec stakeholders are saying and what's going on. If you're a public company, what's going on in the markets. You've got your data layer, you've got what your customers are asking for. All of this feeds in. And this is what's remarkably hard about the product management role. And we've taken for granted what we do. As the product people, we're the humans who sit in the middle and have to like understand all this stuff and then make a call.
Yeah.
And where I think good road mapping practices help, regardless whether you're using AI magic or not, it's helping to create more defensible
Mhm.
decisions where you're able to say, we're going this way. And the reason I've chosen this way is because you can see how it's connected to our goals, right? We're not just putting stuff on the roadmap, we're putting larger scope
Yeah.
goals and problems, and then we're breaking it down so you can see the story that we're going after. And I think
Yeah, and
that's
I think
just going to
that
become more and
ability to
more.
tell a story is really key. That also helps with the alignment piece of, hey, this is how we connect the dots between all these things so that we can tell that story.
Yeah.
Uh, and like anything, there's always a case where you've done all of that work, you've connected all the dots, and somebody comes in with a sledgehammer and just says, nope, sorry, do this thing else. Or some other executive or somebody comes in, sledgehammers all this, and you're just like, sorry. And that's something that's out of your control. And that, even though it's frustrating, I think, and I think we've probably all been in this situation, but you've got to just take a step back and be like, okay, I controlled what I could, and give yourself a little bit of grace and say, okay, I did everything I could here and controlled what I could. I couldn't have controlled that sledgehammer, but I at least had all my ducks in a row and had my story straight. And if yes, we do have to go shift and go this other direction, fine. But don't sit there and be like, it's frustrating, let it get out. But we
Yeah.
will have to move on at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, just bringing this back down to the more tactical, because there's two questions that are actually very related, I think, in the question area. Matthew was asking, can you let me know how you typically talk to business leaders about the differences between discovery and delivery? So he says that he's been putting two swim lanes in his Now Next Later roadmap to show the difference between delivery and the solution, inventing solution to basically what's going to happen in terms of
Yeah.
the upfront work. And Ryan was asking about, are you saying that you keep the roadmap and the project work separate?
Mm-mm. Not necessarily. Like you might keep them as different artifacts, but they certainly, the roadmap and release plan might, but they definitely need to tie to each other. And
Yeah.
sometimes, depending on how I present it, I might actually have a link like, oh, let me dig into this. And let me show you where this is right now. It might be one thing to do. But I love, just to go back to Matthew's one, I love that you're actually phrasing things as discovery and delivery, right? That's one thing, is just even putting labels out there so that people can go, oh. And I think I remember at one company I introduced this to that I worked for, I was like, tell me about what we do for discovery. And they're like, head goes to the side, like, what? And I was like, oh, when we're trying to figure out exactly what to do, or trying to figure out how to solve this problem, like we might have feature idea X, Y, and Z, but we don't know if which one of those might actually solve the problem. We just, some executive or somebody somewhere may have had an idea, but there could have been 3 different ways or 7 different ways to solve that problem. And so discovery is the part of the process where we figure out what that thing is and validate, yeah, we need to solve that problem. If it's like very clear, we know we need to solve that problem, discovery is the aspect to figure out what the right solution is for this product and this company at this time. And they're like, oh, okay. And so the eyes go up and be like, okay, does everyone, so I guess the question back to you, Matthew, does everyone know what discovery and delivery mean? And part of it is, are you able to show them, oh yeah, and it does get a little waterfally. I totally get it. Like discovery should happen before delivery. So there's something that should happen before you actually go off and ship something. And not to try to like tell everybody like the pendulum swings all the way into the waterfall region, but at the same rate, also it's not the, oh, we don't know what to do, and we're going to do whatever comes at us every single week. That's also the pendulum swinging too far in the other direction. So
Yeah.
Having that language is really useful, and say, look, the delivery is the stuff that we are 80 to 90% confident we are going to work on and deliver. And the engineering team is actively working on it right now. Discovery are things that like the engineering team might be working on it, but they're working on figuring out how to actually make it happen before they actually go make it happen. Or the product team is trying to figure, or the design team is trying to figure out what the right solution or suite of solutions are, so we truly solve that problem and drive to the outcome you want. Again, tying those things to concrete goals, right? Tie everything on your roadmap or release plan to some higher level company goal. Yes, this is going to help us. And a sales rep he would always say this, look, if it doesn't make money, save money, or save time, it's not worth doing. And he's, in a sense, he's right.
Mm-hmm.
So had to tie it, like everything should be tied to one of those things. And you have to tell that story to say, yeah, we're working on this. If it's a back end thing that's going to help with your back end APIs, like how is that going to help you save time or save money? Or if it's going to help with conversion or something, it's going to help you make more money or get more money out of current customers or expand to a new customer base. Like you have to tell that story for everything in discovery and delivery. So going back to your question, Matthew, like making sure you're tying those discovery activities and delivery activities to those company goals. That's the key thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really key. Like when you're talking about connecting stuff to make money, save time sort of thing, you should be explicit about that, right? Put that on your roadmap. If somebody's wondering, what are we doing this year? We've got a lot of things that are going to make us money. Cool, there they are. Highlight them, put big green flags on them. If it's there to save time, great, flag it up. Tag it as saves time. And that way, if your exec walks in and said, what are we doing to do X? Great, here's a filtered view looking at just the stuff that's going to help solve for that particular objective, that particular area. And then it becomes very clear if there's things on the roadmap that don't fit any of those things.
Like, hey, why is that there? And then there's always going to be, right? And sometimes, oh, yeah, there's this infrastructure thing the engineering teams are really wanting to, okay, what's it going to do for us? And I think it was Teresa Torres was like, what do you get when you get that? Let's say we have it today. What do we get?
Yeah.
And I love that sort of framing. I was like, okay, yeah, if we had that thing, if that infrastructure thing was done, what would we get? Oh, we'd actually get lower AWS costs or lower Google Cloud, whatever infrastructure costs are. We'd have faster response times for this, that, and the other thing, which means less bugs, less customer complaints. Okay, now we start to see how they go up to one of those goals in the company.
Exactly. It's the so what test. Right. Yes. So I did a roadmap clinic with one of our customers a few years ago, and they showed their roadmap and they'd done a great job in many ways. They had the right level of granularity, but each of the cards was tagged as new feature. That's what the objective was, new feature. And I pointed out, going, well, if everything on your roadmap is just to build new features, then at the end of the year, what do you have? A bunch of features. Does it actually solve any problems? They're like, yeah, this is going to help us make money here, and that's going to help us take that market. Tag them as such, right?
Yes,
Tag which ones are going to do
which. Use that language, not the new.
Because at the end of the year, so what? You have a lot of features. Everyone knows a bunch of features doesn't make the best product.
Output does not. Output is important, but you really want the outcomes, right? This is hence going back. Okay, new features are out. That's great. What do you get when the features launch? And I tell the PMs, like PMs we work with, look, launch date is just start line effectively. And I'm half joking because that really isn't. They do a lot of work up to that. But once it gets launched, that's actually the start line for the feature's life.
Yes.
Because it doesn't exist then. Once it's shipped, now you've got to put a different hat on and say, okay, how do I track this? How do I make sure it's driving the outcome for the business? And if it's not, I either kill the feature, sunset it, back burner it, do something else, right? Add new things. Or, oh, actually, we shipped it. It didn't do what we thought. Customers used it in a different way. We need to actually tweak it this way so it actually really drives the outcome.
Yeah. And that's actually something that I think a lot of product teams fall down on, is that they ship something and they say it's done, and then they move on and they ship the next thing. And what you end up with is a whole bunch of features. But if you build a bunch of features and no one uses them, did you actually build the feature? Right? Where was the value from that? And I actually find it somewhat rude to the development team. You had them build this thing that you said was the next most important thing to do. You launched it out there, and then you never went through the paces to train your salespeople up on it, get your marketing team to properly ship it and find the value, follow up whether it solved the problem, and tweak it until it did do that magic thing you said it was going to do up front. You do all that, then you're making up for the time that the developer spent on it. They're not just doing work in vain.
Yeah. And you're not becoming a custom software house, because the CEO or talk to a high ranking customer or a big customer, they're like, oh, we didn't build this thing for this customer. They probably made a promise. They're turning around and asking the team to do it. I was like, okay, great. But now how do we do X or Y or Z? Because we've just diverted this. So
yeah,
it can be quite the challenge. That's where sometimes you have to just, okay, all right. And let's move on. Yeah. Nobody likes feature factories, except the thing is, sometimes you just have to act like a feature factory at certain times. Okay, we need to ship these 5 features, because we know that these, not 1, 2, or 3, but actually it's these 5 that are actually going to deliver the value. Sometimes it isn't just like shipping 1 feature or 2 features. You actually might need a suite of them to drive a particular outcome. So you might actually have to think about that as, oh, I can't necessarily say that this 1 feature is the only thing that's going to drive this kind of outcome. It might actually be a bunch.
Yeah.
I learned that probably a little bit more later too, is that, oh, yeah, I couldn't tie a specific outcome to certain features that we're working on, but oh, when I take them as a whole, as like a suite of things in this
Yeah.
area, now I know that those 5 things could actually drive this thing. So yeah, I got to be a little bit feature factory project manager right now,
Yeah.
right? I'll put that hat on for a little bit, but I'm still driving these things to a
Yeah.
goal, to an outcome. And that's, I think, that's where sometimes I think we miss. We go back to the, oh, I'm just a feature factory. And it's like,
Yeah, exactly. And that's part of the value of separating out that release plan of which features are going out when, and the bigger picture, which is saying we've got all these things. Some of them we can work on now, some of them we have to work on later, but they're all tied to helping us increase market share or decrease that conversion rate or whatever it is, right, you're trying to do.
yeah.
There's actually one other question here, very, very tactical from Sabrina. How detailed should the points on the roadmap be? Like headings level or short description, something similar? What do you see as best practice?
Yeah, what I've found helpful for me, and I think every company is a little bit because it's know your audience, right? Sometimes your audience is going to want some level of detail, and sometimes your audience just give me the bullet points, right? So first
Yeah.
is know your audience first, right? Understand how they consume information and what's good for them, and you might need to tweak it. But I found, think about newspaper headlines of they have enough information to give you the gist, and you can say, all right, if I had to write the story, I probably can get that sense, or have a headline and a subheader. So you have a headline that gives maybe how it ties up to a particular goal, or like driving retention with an invoicing feature, for example. Like we're going to drive retention for this thing because it's the number one complaint, and we're going to actually improve our invoicing feature so that we can drive more retention because that's the number one reason why our customers are going, right? So like tying this like headline that gives you a direction of, okay, I get sort of problem and solution, a hint around the solution, even if it may not be exactly detailed description of the solution, but also it maybe a subheader like derives of, oh, here's how it ties to some kind of business outcome here.
Yeah.
That's what I've seen work. I don't know. What about you?
Honestly, going as detailed as need to in order to communicate that level of the level of detail for your stakeholders, right? And typically the things that are in the now column are going to be more detailed, where the things
Oh
are
yeah.
later on. You might literally just have a question going, can we
Yeah.
do something about this problem? And it's
Right.
not broken down into finer detail. So it's keeping in mind that the roadmap should be a one-pager communication document. You should be able to share it with somebody and they could read it and they get a sense as to what your strategy is or what you're thinking your strategy is so that they can give
Totally.
feedback on it. So if you need more detail to explain it to people, then do, right? If you need
Right.
less detail to just keep them out of the weeds, then do. And typically it's about having stuff up front more detailed than the stuff later on. But
Mm-hmm.
honestly, it's your roadmap, right? Do what works for your team, to be honest.
Totally. Yeah, I think somebody in the comments wrote like epics. And so one of the things that I try to do is have the epics and any kind of themes or objectives or goals on the roadmap aligned in names, so that some epics in Jira would have similar names to like our goals or themes in our products solutions. So it was like that was super helpful to connect. That was the tie-in between the two systems and artifacts.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly that. So we're out of time for questions today, but I want to point out to people that we have another one of these coming up. It's going to be one of our how-to series. We're going to be talking about how to build your ultimate product management tool stack.
Mm.
And also, we did talk about now, next, later roadmap templates or roadmap templates. So we've created one. You can access it here. It's in our sandbox, so it's preloaded data that you can play with. You can see how it fits for your own, and then when ready, you can turn it into your own saved roadmap. And so, on that note, I just want to say a big thank you, C.Todd, for joining us today. It's been fantastic having this chat. I
Yeah.
think we could talk for hours
I
about
know we could probably, I'm like, it flew by because I'm like, wow, an hour. I just
Yeah,
looked up and I was
exactly
like,
that.
oh my God, it's 101. Holy crap. Like, where did the time go? We can keep talking for a while. Anyways, thank you all
So,
for listening and thank you for the invite.
of course, great to have you here. Thank you, everybody. Great to have y'all here, and see you next time.
Thanks,
Bye for
everybody.
now.
Take care. Cheers.